Welcome back. The SABC says it's confident that the implementation of its turnaround plan will ensure financial stability at the corporation. The public broadcaster tabled its 2018-2019 annual report in Parliament today. SABC Chief Financial Officer Yolande Biljon joins us now for more. Very good evening to you, Yolande. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Good evening to Teresa. Thank you for inviting me.
So your total tone of the budget that you tabled today, how would you describe it? Hopeful?
Hopeful, positive, signs of improvement, signs that the effort of the past 18 months is starting to yield results. It gives us definitely hope for the future.
Now let's talk about, obviously, the big anxiety has been around the bailout that the SABC has been waiting for. We saw the communications minister say this weekend that it is likely to be concluded by the end of the week because the SABC has met all of the conditions set before. So just refresh us on what exactly you were supposed to do. What were the salient points of what you had to satisfy for Treasury to give you the money?
There were 12 preconditions defined. Of the 12, the SABC was responsible for about 9 of them. We believe we have achieved most of them. There's one specific item that we're still in engagement, but the plan is in place. So we are confident that with the support of our stakeholders, we're able to say we've met the conditions. As such, we are able to comply with the receipt of the full 3.2 billion, as much as it will be in 2 tranches in the course of the next 6 months.
Okay, so just you say you've complied. You were tasked with completing 9. You've complied with most except for one in particular. Which one is that?
It relates to our media assets, and that's the one where there is a plan in place and it is agreed to with our shareholders.
And the ones you are complying with?
Is everything from cash flow forecast to content and capital acquisition plans to cost containment measures to revenue generation activities to the learning the lessons from the past with respect to the breakdown in the governance environment to taking that forward to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So it's a combination of those things.
One of the major things that you were asked to do was to appoint a restructuring officer. Has that been done?
It's not in the SABC's purview to appoint this function. It is with our shareholder at this point in time, and we wait for them to give us guidance.
So are those some of the 3 that they were to fulfill?
Yes,
and they are intending to do that anytime soon?
We're not quite sure. We're awaiting feedback from them.
Okay, so Treasury has also tasked you with compiling a list of non-core assets that you would offload and sell. Have you done that?
With respect to property, plant and equipment, we have done that. With respect to our media assets, we are in the process of developing a plan of action there.
Are you able to share with us which ones you've identified as non-core?
Not at this point in time, yeah.
But are any within the process of being offloaded or sold?
No, not right now, no.
Okay. So then let's just look at the budget that you've tabled. You've said that there was a net loss of 482 million rand. Tell us exactly from where this came from.
So part of the positive messages in our annual report that was tabled today is an improvement of 35% on the net loss for last year, a restated loss that was 744 million. Today we're able to report that the loss for the financial year ending 31st of March 2019 is the 482 million. So a significant improvement. Main contributors we believe remains unfortunately the cost of sports rights specifically was a significant contributor. The revenue declined by about 6% versus last year. Very constrained marketing conditions that we were operating in, competition from other free-to-air operators as well as digital, etc. So the market conditions definitely had a major impact. And then of course, as a result of our cash constraints and liquidity-related constraints, we were unable to invest in content, which impacted on your advertising revenue. And we could also not pay everything in time, which results in interest. So those are the main contributors.
You also mentioned a decline in total revenue of 3% to 6.4 billion rand within the 2017-2018 financial year. What was the reason behind this? Was it some of the issues that you mentioned?
Yes. The majority of the decline is related to advertising revenue. Television licenses also declined marginally, but the vast majority is related to the advertising revenue, which declined because of the market and the inability to invest in content.
So I'm wondering, because you say you were unable to also invest or you had curtail your investment. Does this, though, not go against your mandate, just in terms of some of the stipulations you have to satisfy?
So in the vast majority, I do believe we've met the ICASA requirements. But in the context of balancing your payroll, for example, and your investment in content, marketing, other operating expenditure, just keeping lights and water on, we have a daily balancing act, or we have had it to date, which means that sometimes you actively choose to conserve the cash because you need to pay payroll, for example.
And irregular expenditure, how much did that account for in the last financial year?
The irregular expenditure came to 336 million rand. Again, it is a significant improvement on that of the past year, which was 570 million rand. And if you even analyze it a little bit further, the 336, about 41% of that relates to actions from prior years that we're still reporting on. So as much as we still have a long way to go in eradicating irregular expenditure, we believe the behavior in the organization
What
is
are the
changing.
main culprits of that fruitless and wasteful expenditure?
So, of course, fruitless and wasteful is different to irregular expenditure. Fruitless and wasteful, the main contributing factors this year were sports rights, specifically, that we were unable to broadcast, etc., which resulted in major adjustments, in fact, to the value of about 141 million rand, which became fruitless and wasteful. And the other main factor was the interest and penalties that we incurred because of the liquidity.
And I asked that because you mentioned, so 41% of that irregular expenditure was from previous years. You say 63% also for the same period. So it still says there's a high level of fruitless and wasteful expenditure within the past financial year, and I want to understand what the exact source of that are.
So with fruitless and wasteful expenditure is the sports rights item, the content that we could not broadcast, which contributes 141 million rand of the 224 million, and 83 million relates to interest. So the actual activity of a person or a business unit in the organization is few millions only with respect to fruitless and wasteful.
Taking into account the fact that also one of the reasons you were brought in to clean up was because of the lack of corporate governance, lack of adherence to the rules and procedure. Is that still a major problem?
As long as we have irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it will be a problem. But we believe with, a year and a little bit under new management, that you can see that clean-up activities. Consequence management is a theme of the day. It's a major discussion between our shareholders, with the Auditor General, with our internal governance properties, So we are certainly focusing on that and trying to also change the behavior by ensuring policies and procedures are visible, people are educated, they're aware of it, and they understand that there's consequences.
So would you say that part of it is people's lack of education or adherence to the rules?
It is both. The policies were outdated and the SOPs were outdated, if they even existed. So we've started that rejuvenation process, and then you have an obligation to ensure people are aware of it and they understand what is written in the policy and procedure. And then the next step is to govern that and to ensure that if you then do actively choose to not adhere to a policy and procedure, you understand that you will be held responsible.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of the highlights of this review period. You do mention preparations of news coverage for the 2019 elections. How much did that cost you?
The final bill was about, I think, 14 million rand. The budget for it was 30 million rand. The previous actual expenditure, I think, was 80 million rand or something for the previous election. So you can see already a significant improvement, and yet I do believe the quality of the execution was significantly better than in the past. So we were very satisfied with the process around the elections, very proud of it. It was acknowledged broadly, and I think even won some awards.
And I ask this because one of the comments made by the minister at the weekend was that, it's all well and good that we're giving the SABC this money, but they have to not only adhere to the mandate, but they have to also broaden their scope in terms of the mandate. Inclusivity is one of the biggest things in terms of ensuring that you broadcast to all, but also relevant content. So that would also suggest to me that you would incur extra costs. How do you channel those fees, and how do you identify what is of priority?
So, I mean, our editorial policy and the principles that inform that, of course, decides who we speak to about what. And I think it's a very good policy. It is nearing a final review. We've taken the input from the various parties that wish to be consulted on the matter. And I think there's a good policy that's going to come out of that, which we proudly stand by. The other thing is just, yes, there may be extra costs, but you can be clever in how you apply the amount of money you have to it. So we're already using technology much better, for example. We have hybrid vehicles, for example, which means you don't send a whole few trucks, you just send one, it broadcasts broadly. So there's various initiatives, practically and otherwise, that you can limit the amount of investment despite having to broaden your mandate.
Yolande, very quickly, just in terms of future challenges and being pragmatic, these sporting rights, as you've mentioned, have contributed to liquidity challenges, having cash in hand. What is your strategy going forward? Because it is part of the mandate. A lot of South Africans feel they're being very hard done by the SABC, not being able to have access to some of these matches, but yet it's something that you say you cannot afford.
So we are working closely, whether it be with the relevant departments in government, as well as the stakeholders, the sporting federations, to find sustainable solutions that will firstly ensure that the public mandate is executed and we keep the public's interest at the heart of it, as opposed to necessarily making profit from these things. Noting that the pool of money that it comes from is extremely limited and possibly shrinking, and you're competing widely. So within all of that, we're trying to find a solution, but it's not easy. It's extremely complex and it will probably take some more time.
Well, thank you very much for your time. SABC CFO Yolande Biljon speaking to us. It's over to Stephen.